once or twice every generation, there comes a game that leaves a profound impression on you. And I'm not just talking about being impressed with the game, but rather being left with powerful conflicting emotions, a sadness at having the adventure come to an end, mixed with the supreme satisfaction by the way the experience was concluded. Elden Ring did it for me in the modern era, so did Spike Chunsoft's Zero Escape Virtue's Last Reward on the 3DS, and Naughty Dog's Last of Us Part 2 on the PS4. And now, after 25 hours in, I have this feeling growing within me that Monolith Soft's Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition might just do the same. What A was to Alpha in Future Redeemed is now Aiva to me. Everyone, say hi to my female Antos, who will conquer the very fabric of Mira for the next 300 hours. As Alma opens the door to the Lifehold, suddenly my blood flows stronger, breathing comes easier, and my will regains control of my muscles.
Tonight the music seems so loud. I wish that we could lose this crowd. Maybe it's better this way.
But I'm getting ahead of myself as our journey begins by reminding us how fragile it all is. Two alien species locked in war above our planet Earth, humanity once again overestimating their abilities in the face of the unknown. The word Xeno means foreigner, different in origin, but what happens when you cannot relate to it? As these aliens, who are at best indifferent to our fate, must view the destruction of Earth as the necessary evil to gain power and influence. I'm assuming, not that different from us actually. To defy that fate, the only thing we can do is to run away, hoping that we can find refuge in stability once again. Seeing how the Earth was shattered to pieces, looking back on it all while the engines are running, must be hard, to say the least. You realize the impermanence of everything. Millions probably didn't make it, your brothers and sisters all blown up to pieces. How our reality is all a flux, the appearance of security was just that. Couldn't endure the entropy over time. For 2 hard years, the White Whale and its crew seemed like the only hope for humanity's future. The Earth Life Colonization Project didn't give in, holding the torch. But when the aliens confronted humanity once again, they had no choice but to make an emergency landing on Mira, what was to be our new world. After being rescued, killing a few monsters, jumping around to get the sluggishness out of my system, I'm greeted with this beautiful, rich wildlife and the vastness of this world. See, one of the things in the numbered Xenoblade Trilogy is that I've never felt completely immersed in the world, not just because of the constant loading screens, but also size as well. This feeling of being completely dwarfed by the world is kind of missing. Xenoblade 1, I suppose, was the closest in realizing that potential with Gar Plains, but then as Mechonis in the second half of the game reared its head, it couldn't quite do it for me as a package. Same with Uraya in Xenoblade 2, the best location in the game, surely, and it is doing it for me in some places, but not in others. Ionis, Mechonis, Alres, and Ionios all felt a bit lacking. Some places were too narrow, too linear, didn't have enough density or rewards for exploration, the list goes on. I absolutely love these worlds that Takahashi-san created, but Mira hits different. To give credit where it's due, recently I was impressed by how Future Redeemed handled it, as this map was relatively big and varied, vertical, while giving me the motivation and rewards to explore every nook and cranny. Now, I want you to take that map, flatten it a little bit, and make it even less linear, and probably multiply it by 100 in size, and you get the world of Mira, and it is beautiful. Ever since Elden Ring's world, the lands between, I don't remember being this engaged, immersed in an open world, this excited. Finally, no loading screens, no linear narrow paths, you just go anywhere and explore to your heart's content. Breath of the Wild style. And that's what I did. Got some treasures, killed some monsters, and took my first step into the new Los Angeles. Humanity's last-ditch effort to regain a sense of familiarity once again. Thanks to the way the White Whale was designed, it was a relatively safe landing using their last fuel, protected from the outside dangers thanks to the walls of the outer perimeter. Not terribly unlike Attack on Titan if you watch the anime. Highly recommended. Countless houses in the residential district, to cafes, restaurants, shopping malls, you name it. Over the span of 2 months, a self-sufficient city that is reminiscent of how life used to be back on Earth was built. After all, we always yearn for that tight-knit community, something to fall back on when our individual efforts fail to produce results. See, we can't do everything by ourselves. Alone, without the helping hands of others, humanity has no future. Especially not in this alien world that is already prejudiced against us. Remember, humanity is in their world, not the other way around. We are the little pests that are infesting their home. And to that end, 8 divisions are segmented to satisfy the needs of New LA. Pathfinders plant data probes to get a feel for the danger levels, the wildlife, and most importantly, locating the missing parts of the lifehold. Yes, the fact of the matter is many people were sleeping in stasis within these pods, apart from the essential personnel like pilots, engineers, and some fighters in this 2-year-long voyage. They were unaware of the chaos outside as the ship was scattered all across Mira in its aftermath. And make no mistake, we need each and every one of them if you want a varied enough gene pool for future generations. For that, we need to both push the envelope with offense and defense. Interceptors are concerned with the latter, protecting New LA from the indigents. I suppose it is sad that we're killing essentially innocent life to survive. It is a dog-eat-dog world out there. Especially the dangerous ones named tyrants need to be nipped in the bud before they close in on the city. While they're not a threat now, they will be later, surely. We need to sacrifice some of our morals and act selfish to preserve life. Harriers know that all too well. The Scout pilot conducting the test flight, specializing in preemptive strikes on clear and obvious threats. Reclaimers are cargo people who will retrieve and bring back pieces of the White Whale's wreckage and the lifehold, while the Curators scout ahead to unexplored territories to bring back whatever samples they can get their hands on, fruits, bugs, sticks, and stones. Prospectors, on the other hand, poke around for minerals and resources. The White Whale technically has enough supplements and provisions, but they won't last forever. We need to replenish the food, electricity, and fuel to keep going. From the socket of a scale's knee joint to the frying pan in Lynn's kitchen, prospectors deliver the goods, so to speak. Outfitters are blade intermediaries that work alongside the private arms manufacturers, seeking out anything that might inspire new weapon ideas, assisting with new prototypes. And last but not least, the Mediators, keeping everything hunky-dory with Jonan Jonkyu public. Any problem a civilian might have, Mediators resolve the tension with their bubbly personalities. Fight with your neighbors, something gets stolen, a lost cat, they're the judges and the cops of New LA. And through these 8 divisions, no one is necessarily excluded, as people of all skills and talents are helping on their own ways. See, to understand Xenoblade X, we need to listen to Tetsuya Takahashi-san, as in his Xeno Persona interview he said, quote, "When talking about art, there's always addition and subtraction going on. It's not a competition to see who can draw in the most details. Similarly, I think if games have a good balance of that addition and subtraction, you will think it's well made." Monolith Soft is owned by Nintendo, so we definitely have a good backing, but it's not as good as people might think, and we don't have a huge budget like major titles. We have to work with that in mind, and I used to work at Squaresoft, so I often use addition too much. But that addition risks losing the narrative we want to tell, and it becomes all messy unless we subtract. I'm always thinking about how I need to be careful, but it's honestly a work in progress. Works that really leave a lasting impression know how to balance the two, and the subtraction accentuate the overall narrative that they want to tell. This is something that differentiates Gears and Saga from the Blade series, at least in my estimations. While it is undeniable how impactful, how amazing, how profound Gears and Saga still is to this day, the sheer ambition of those titles sometimes dilutes the character development, pacing, and the emotional impact. While Xenosaga is, I think, much better at this than Xenogears, Xenoblade games find a modern, novel balance between addition and subtraction. It can maybe at times feel a bit vanilla, but I don't think so. The emphasis is different. Xenoblade Chronicles X, from what I've played, is subtracting the character focus inherent in the Number Trilogy slightly to strengthen the world building and exploration instead, while affinity quests give that Yakuza-like side quests and character growth. The world facilitates exploration and a sense of adventure. Unlike Xenoblade 3's theatrical writing, which is obviously taking as Shakespearean in spirit, Zed and the Mobius watching the moving pixels in amusement, the side-scroller duel of N and Noah, the camera panning back and forth as each of them delivers their lines. This is a storytelling technique that drives the point home regarding how Aionios is the entire game that we've been playing, really, is nothing more than a stage show for Mobius' amusement. Both the writing and cinematography in the cutscenes reinforce this thematic thread. Now, in contrast, Xenoblade X flips all that to its head, taking a more realistic approach, not unlike Western sci-fi movies and games. People talk in more natural ways, and I feel like the jokes are landing more often than not, making me chuckle. Not a lot of theatrics or preachy JRPG lines here. The Mass Effect Trilogy is probably the strongest Western comparison here. Contrary to what a lot of world builders out there seems to say, realism is not the only way we get immersed in the world. Soft world building is a thing. It is the art of experiential consistency, the idea of how everything fitting into an emotional, psychological, or thematic backbone, even if it is not quote-unquote realistic. A good example would be the towers of neatly stacked trash in the movie Wall-E, taller than skyscrapers, built out of these little cubes with no structural integrity. They definitely would have fallen over and scattered in the hundreds or thousands of years, but they are there to make a literal monument of our waste, to make us feel small, that we have created such devastation in the world. It is not necessarily realistic world building. The world couldn't have ended up this way, but it does invoke real emotions, a real experience. And that is immersive. Takahashi-san says, quote, "Let me use the example of something we use in our daily lives, like a cup. In fantasy and sci-fi, there is an inclination to design interesting looking cups, but I avoid that. I try to keep things that are related to our everyday lives and familiar to us as is, but for things that aren't related, I go for interesting designs. That's my approach. Not just that, but everyday items like shoes and whatnot, stairs too, things you can relate to like that, we leave as is. But as you go on, we put in more and more unrealistic things. Sometimes I wonder myself why I make RPGs, and I think at the core, it's just that I like them. After all, why would I make something I hate? With that being said, I've been someone with low self-esteem ever since I was a child, so it might be that I want to play God within the world that I create. There's also the desire to be in that world I create and to try and create the entirety of the world, so to speak. I think it's just that the easiest way to go about that is through an RPG. I'm not much of a person to focus on characters, personally. I put more weight on the universe. That hasn't changed since Xenogears. Of course, I'm not saying characters aren't important. We're making a game, so I want to please players as much as I can, but if I were to say which that I personally put more weight on, it is the universe. Don't you think that Xenoblade X fits that definition that Takahashi-san just gave almost word for word? Lynn's frying pan she uses to cook for Tatsu is realistic, along with all the furnitures and plates and cups in the blade barracks. But there are also these weird Noppons, aliens, and a huge city that somehow survived while all the pieces are scattered conveniently across the planet. It is that unique balance Takahashi-san plays around between realism and fantasy in each game, and I think it pays dividends to keep people engaged, as we all know the disappointment of playing a safe sequel these days. Tears of the Kingdom, Spider-Man 2, and even, yes, God of War Ragnarok all ride the existing wave. They're all fantastic games, don't get me wrong, but are they pushing the envelope? Are they taking risks? Doing anything that different from the original? I don't think so. Xenoblade 1, 2, 3, and especially X, while similar in a lot of ways, embrace risk-taking and change. With new characters, new storylines, new side quests, new ideas that are explored. None of these games are afraid to wear their hearts on their sleeves. Think of the tonal shift from Xenoblade 1 to Xenoblade 2, that anime sauce and humor being emphasized now. How about Xenoblade 2 to 3? Now in a much darker world, the character-driven philosophical angle is being emphasized. See, what I'm trying to say is that Takahashi-san doesn't stagnate, and Xenoblade Chronicles as a series is a beautiful representation of that. Obviously, I still have a long ways to go. Honestly, a 300-hour-long adventure might be ahead of me, but only 25 hours in, taking my time with it all, I can see the potential here. The combat will surely breathe and open up with more characters, classes, and challenging encounters coming my way, and we will talk about all that on this channel. And to be perfectly honest, for the first 10 hours or so, the game completely overwhelmed me with all the information overload. I felt like I was a chicken running with its head cut off, felt like I barely scratched the surface of this vast world, which honestly can be a future. Not a Ubisoft open world bloat. About this volume of content, Takahashi-san says, quote, I think the feeling of having a lot of content differs from person to person, but ultimately I like having an abundance of content. As a genre, RPGs require a certain volume of content, and there's a minimum amount of content required to play. I think this is the result of first ensuring that minimum volume and then adding on, I want to do this and I want to do that. However, even though we say abundance of content, it covers a lot of things, and I would say the volume of content created in the Xenoblade Chronicles series is the volume of idea content. We sift through the content to figure out what the volume is, deemed essential for an RPG that can also be conveyed easily to our players. For example, let's say we focus on the details of a map and character, and create many variations of context-specific animations. I think players would enjoy it even so, but eventually they would stop noticing it after a while, say 30 minutes of playing the game. We always ask ourselves if there are any other ways to achieve greater satisfaction for players, and upon exploring and devising many ideas, we ultimately decide the appropriate volume of content. Being stuck in a Wii U rut for 10 years, honestly a lot of people underhyped this game, at least for me. As a complete newcomer, I wasn't one of the lucky 6 people who had a Wii U back then. People who did roll the credits were saying things like how the main story is completely trash, which so far, I would disagree. And while that might have been true back then, which I wouldn't know, in Definitive Edition there are countless re-rendered cutscenes with new characters, events, and a new epilogue that apparently promises to tie loose ends. While it's a bit early for me to comment now, I think Monolith Soft might have just fixed the game. As my good friend Space King Scott likes to say, if you haven't done so already, watch his How Xenoblade X Saved Me video, where I suppose it is a great case study that illustrates how video games can be life-altering. It is certainly not easy to make good games. Just look at the great to bad games ratio. When the experience lands, especially at the right time in your life, it can be transformative. Now, I wouldn't say X impacted me as deeply as my friend here, but I hope I was able to convey how moving this experience has been for me. And if you're still on the fence about giving X a chance and feel bummed out about the latest Nintendo releases not quite satisfying the thirst, I think this is your justification. If anything I've said in this first impressions has even remotely interested you in this world, do yourself a favor and take that first step into Mira before the inevitable spoilers ruin the fun. I can guarantee you that you won't be disappointed.
Another day, another time, another sky we've seen before. Believe yourself, believe your words, believe your choices made you strong. Remember me, remember those that you're the only one who can live my life with smile and hope. So I said, hey.